Hi, I'm Susanna Bowling, and this is live from the Hotel Edison, Times Square Chronicles Presents. Today I have 4 guests, and they all do multiple things. They write musicals, they write scores, they write lyrics, but they also write books. And right now, I don't know if you know this, but to get a musical to Broadway or to anywhere takes anywhere from 8 to 12 years. So what do you do in the meantime? My first guest is David Spencer, who I have known forever, it seems. He has written a book called The Noveliers.
Novelizers.
The Novelizers. See, this is why...
You got my name right, but not the title. She was worried about the name.
Yes, I will.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, all right. Yes. So my short introduction about the Novelizers is I grew up reading books based on TV shows and novelized movies, and those authors had as much impact on me as the great musical theater writers, and some of them were just incredible writers who had careers of their own. And it used to annoy the hell out of me that people called it hack work, because it wasn't. I've spent my life adapting things for the musical theater, and adaptation is just as much of an art one way or the other. So it celebrates those writers, their history, the craft, and that's what I wrote.
Can you tell me about your background in musical theater and what you've done there?
I've written a bunch of musicals, such as I did Weird Romance and The Apprenticeship of Diddy Kravitz with Alan Menken, Weird Romance also with Alan Brennert, and I did some shows for TheaterWorks. I did their unique and original versions of Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables. I wrote the music and lyrics for those, and the librettist director was Rob Barron. And I wrote a book called The Musical Theater Writer Survival Guide, and I taught at BMI and a bunch of other places.
Which is how we met.
That's right. That's where you were singing for somebody. So that's my background. That's what I've done. And I will just add that when I realized that 4 of us had all had new books being written, that we'd written and had published at the same time, I emailed everybody and I said, we ought to be talking about this together. So that's why we're all here.
My next guest is Alison Hubbard, who wrote The Kelsey Outrage. Alison, tell us about your background in musical theater and then how you wrote a book.
Well, I wrote musical theater for 30 years. I had a partner, Kim Oler. He wrote the music and I wrote the lyrics. We wrote many touring musicals for TheaterWorks USA, and we wrote The Enchanted Cottage, Little Women, and Buddy's Tavern, which were full-length musicals. And we had a lot of productions, publications, and I just got to the point where Kim and I sort of, I guess, took a break, and I happened to pass by a plaque in my hometown of an unsolved murder. And it was a man who was tarred and feathered before being murdered by persons unknown. And I live on Long Island in a very sort of, quiet, beautiful community. And come to find out, this was a highly unusual event in our town. It wasn't the Wild West. This was 1872. It was very calm there, and it was just this group of extremely wealthy people who decided they would take the law into their own hands and tar and feather a man. And it involved a love triangle with a girl. So I spent many years researching this and discovered that it was this incredible story right in my backyard. And I just was passionately devoted to telling this story.
My next guest is Stephen Cole, who has written a book that, if you're a musical I can't speak anymore these days, a musical theater nerd like me, then you are going to want to read this book. It is called Mary and Ethel and Mickey who? Mikey. Oh,
Mikey Who. Yes, Mary and Ethel and Mikey Who. That's okay. So Mary and Ethel, we all know that that's Mary Martin and Ethel Merman. And did you want me to tell them about my career a little bit? Okay, yeah. So I've written 14 produced musicals, several of them off Broadway, a couple in London, and one in the Middle East in Qatar, which was written for the Emir of Qatar and 1,000 of his best friends. In the meantime, I'm still writing musicals, but I had this visitation from Ethel Merman and Mary Martin on the beach at Asbury Park, and they said, "Why don't you write a book about us?" I knew Ethel Merman when I was a very small boy. I was good friends with her. And I also knew Mary Martin a little bit too, and we used to correspond when she lived in Palm Springs. So I came up with the thought about Mikey, who is Mikey Marvin Minkus from Brooklyn, New York, who goes to save his dear friend Ethel Merman. He's never met her, but she's his dear friend. He's a super nerd fan. And he goes to find her because she has a brain tumor. He enters her apartment somehow, and he walks into her closet. And as he comes out of the other end of this darkened walk-in closet, he finds he is in the Imperial Theater in 1939, about to see Mary Martin sing My Heart Belongs to Daddy. And from then, he goes through time portals and visits with Ethel and Mary throughout their careers. Yeah, so that's basically what this book is about. And what else can I tell you?
we're going to ask different questions, but I have to tell you, when I read that title, because I was so thinking Mickey Rooney, that my brain literally read Mickey. And so you talking about that makes me go, oh, wow. And I'll make you $1 million bet that a lot of people when see that title will think the same thing that I did. So yay for you, because because it makes you think, it makes you go a different way. You know, we think that we're reading things because of where the chronology of what we know is. So my last guest is Douglas J. Cohen, who has written How to Survive a Killer Musical, Agony and Ecstasy on the Road to Broadway. Okay, killer musicals. I love killer musicals. One of my favorites is Ride the Cyclone. So, and right now, Dead Outlaw. So tell us about who you are, what else you've done, and how do you survive a killer musical?
Well, thank you. Like my colleagues here, I also was in BMI and ASCAP, and also was a veteran of writing TheaterWorks USA musicals. I've written probably about 20, most of them produced. Some of them you might know, The Gig, which was done at Goodspeed and at MTC, and Children's Letters to God, which was off Broadway. And Stephen, thank you. Stephen and I share a collaborator on that, David Evans. I also wrote The Evolution of Man, which was at the Cell Theater with Dan Ellish. And so this is maybe the show that I'm best known for. I hope that one day I will eclipse that, but I don't mind having it as a calling card. It was a show that I first started when I was 25 or 6, and the journey ended when I was a father with a child. Well, that's usually when you're a father, in about 11 years later. And so this is my journey with one particular show, which is a killer musical because it's literally a musical about a killer, a guy that couldn't get arrested as an actor, so he becomes a killer to make headlines in the New York Times. It's based on a novel by William Goldman, who many people might know as the author of The Princess Bride and Marathon Man and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the movie. Getting the rights to it was quite an adventure in itself. And then when I had that all sewed up, I thought this is going to be a very smooth ride. And it was anything but smooth, but it was very eventful and interesting. And I have to thank, Stephen was saying about the portal in Mary Martin's closet. I had my own personal portal, which is during the whole time, the 10 years that I was working on this show and shepherding around, I kept meticulous journals. And during the pandemic, I checked these journals and I felt as if I was entering a time capsule. And everything came back vividly in Technicolor. And that's the basis for writing this book. Oh, the show. I'm sorry. Thank you. The show is No Way to Treat a Lady, which was a book by William Goldman, then became a movie starring George Segal, Rod Steiger, and Lee Remick, and Eileen Heckert, and then became a musical that has had over 200 productions. And actually, just if I can elaborate on that a little bit, what I think we all have in common, everyone here, besides being really, really talented, skillful writers, like talking to my colleagues, I'm not talking about myself, but I hope that I can keep up with them, is that we also, because we are published authors, but we're also produced writers, we occupy what I think of as the middle ground, which is this group of people that is very much a part of the musical theater scene, who have achieved a lot against all odds, who are craftspeople, who really know how to put together a show, write a song with a beginning, middle, and end, which gives you character and context. And yet, because we haven't had that huge break, we are not necessarily as celebrated. But the work that we do is substantial, and it's worth examining. And when you look at shows that have 200 productions or shows that even have 5 productions, there's a lot that goes into that, and that is attention must be paid. So that's what this is about.
I was going to ask where you all met, but I think I know this answer now. TheaterWorks USA, right? So wait.
Stephen is the outline.
I never, I did write one little one act for TheaterWorks for one of their shows, and it got cut almost immediately. So I never made a penny. Yeah, so I'm not them.
Okay, so living as a writer is a very hard thing, and I know you won the Jonathan Larson Award.
No, I won the Kleban.
The Kleban. Sorry, I'm like, I swear, my brain is like on over. No, because I just saw Stereophonic.
All of us won the Kleban.
I did not. I was the runner-up. I was the runner-up. I actually found that out, and I was in the top 10 for 10 years. But I have not yet won it. But I did win the Fred Ebb, 2 Richard Rodgers, and a Jonathan Larson grant, which went to a musical Barnstormer, which we talked about. Yes. There is, and somebody else here has won. You have a Roger. You have 2
I won
Rodgers.
the 2 Rodgers and Fred Ebb, and
You won a Fred Ebb?
yeah,
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
and or was it John Kander?
No.
It was Fred Ebb.
Okay.
Okay, and then the Kleban. I shared the Kleban, which was thankfully a really large sum of money, and that was really thrilling.
I also have a Rogers Award. I remember, like you, I'd been a runner-up for a while, and every year I would get the envelope out of the mailbox and, okay, who won my money this year? and then I opened it up and I said, oh, I won my money.
And David and I, in fact, were on the same year for the Kleban. I got for the book of Night of the Hunter, and you were a lyricist. So libretto, I always think, is much harder to win than anything more. Gosh, that's like the toughest thing. I never won a Rogers. I never won a Jerry Herman. Is there a Jerry Herman Award? There should be. But the Kleban kept me in T-shirts for a few years. It was very good.
I want to add one thing about the Kleban. David helped me so much, the most generous guy on the planet. And I was applying many times, and he said, when I refined my submission, and I said, what do you mean you refined your submission? He showed me what it wrote, and it was very helpful.
May I add to that?
Sure.
Alison wrote me about 12 years ago and said, you need to win the Kleban. You should be winning the Kleban. Share with me your next submission to them, and I will give you my input. And I did. I still didn't win it, but I think that's the year I came closest, that I was the runner-up.
Well, I used a lot of David's pointers.
Oh, so thank you. It really, that all emanates from David. Thank you. And I did win the Noel Coward Prize, which was discontinued after 2 years. So But anyway, that's just a bit of trivia.
Well, the reason I bring up the grants and the prizes is that my question now is, what makes you happiest? Writing the novels or writing musical theater?
Well, I have one novel that I did write, which was actually it was a tie-in novel. I wrote an original novel based on the TV series Alien Nation. And how that happened, that's a funny story, actually, a fun story, which is I was watching the TV series, which is a kind of mashup of cop and science fiction. It's basically a buddy thing. There's a human cop and an alien cop. And I loved it. But I'm a sissy musical theater writer. I can't go to California for television. So I wrote a note to the showrunner who had developed it from the movie for television, a guy named Kenneth Johnson. And I gave it to my agent at the time, the late Scott Shukat, and Scott sent it to them. And apparently he loved the note. Scott called me back. He said he was laughing. He loved it. They'll let you pitch from New York. So I pitched them stories from New York. And I was about to get my third session, which means even if they don't buy it, they have to pay you. And the show was canceled. And about 6 months later, I read in Starlog magazine, the ultimate, science fiction fanboy magazine, that Kevin Ryan, who was then editor at Pocketbooks of the Star Trek department, not the science fiction department, the dedicated Star Trek department. And he thought that Alien Nation was too good to let die. So he got the rights to do 8 novels, 3 novelizing the scripts that hadn't been filmed, and 5 originals. And I had all these stories that I'd been pitching. So I took the one I liked best. I knew him from somewhere, I don't remember where. But I called him, I said, what do you need? He said, 3 chapters and an outline. I wrote 3 chapters and an outline. Months later, he called me back. He said, I like it. I'm prepared to give you $8,000 and this. And I said, it's okay with me if it's okay with my agent. He goes, Scott Shukat, I forgot you had an agent. We didn't have this conversation. And Scott called me back up and he said he was tough, but I got another $1,000 out of him. Anyway, and then I wrote that novel. It's called Passing Fancy, Alien Nation number 6, Passing Fancy. And like this, it's one of the most fun things I've ever written.
So again, my question is, musical theater or novel? Or a Doctor Who script?
Okay. The answer to that is actually...
The Doctor Who script.
It was Alien Nation, not Doctor Who. Writing this book was a complete surprise to me because, I wanted to celebrate the writer, so there's interviews and profiles and excerpts, but it's also a history of the genre. And I've been sponging this stuff up since I was a kid. And I'm a member of an organization, this actually exists, the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers. My Alien Nation novel was my de facto membership card. And the co-founder, Lee Goldberg, who is a New York Times bestselling author, kept utzing me to write this book. And I kept saying, it's a niche book. What kind of advance am I going to get? And over about 10 years, I wound up writing 5 essays. And then Ben Olmert, who is the publisher of Bear Manor, said, if you want to write the book, I'll publish it. And I went, okay. And I started doing research. And as I was telling you before, I got this jazz that career historians get when they put together dots that nobody's put together before. And it was amazing.
Sunday in the Park.
Kind of, and it became a celebration. It became a craft book. Once I knew what kind of book I was writing, which I guess gets to the point, they're all great when you get into what I call the center of the project. I mean, when things are misfiring, when things aren't quite working, and then you hit that little breakthrough point where you go, oh. And then the more you straighten out the carpet, the smaller the bumps get because you're in the center of it and you can feel it. Right. And when you're not there, it's awful, and when you are there, it's fantastic. So I think any project can give you that. It's just the process of getting there.
So long-winded.
That's my name.
I know. Same question.
Same question. Would I rather do musicals or?
That makes you want to write the most.
Let's see. Musicals are fun, but musicals are impossible at the same time. In this day and age, getting a show on, I figure I'll be 80 when some of my shows get on. It's harder and harder and harder. I've been lucky. I had a new musical open this summer, and it might be going to London, and they're raising money. But I'm also, which is called Go in Hollywood, with composer David Crane. And it's really good. And I actually said to him, I said, if someone wants to take an option on this for Broadway, let's not do it. Because it'll kill me. It'll just kill me. Whereas writing this book, I sat down and I wrote it and I rewrote it and I gave it to certain friends to read that helped me and that fixed and that said, change this, do that. It was a lot of fun not to collaborate. There is that. I love collaborating with a composer, but then there's directors and choreographers and set designers and producers who tell you everything to do. And this was just me. And boy, was that a lot of fun. And it's a fantasy. So I have a second novel that I wrote during the pandemic, which I think is so much better than this. It's called 2020, and it takes place during 2020. And I wrote it during 2020, but it's really a murder mystery that took place in the 1980s, a real life murder mystery. But it's it's not as perhaps saleable as this with those two ladies in it. But we'll see. And I get more of a kick now writing prose than I do, except I just wrote 2 new songs, so what do I know?
Alison, same question.
So after writing musical theater for so long and some very bitter experiences, and then my partnership broke up, I just really decided one day, I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be inspired, to have this passionate, creative moment in my life. And that is what happened, where I started writing this and it became a life. I went to NYU, I took courses, I went to summer programs, writers' workshops, Bread Loaf and Yale, and I actually started walking the walk of just writing short stories and novels. And I really don't miss musical theater. Sometimes I think about the characters and, they're out there, they're still singing their songs and they're still, part of me, but I really don't feel that I will ever go back to that. And just what Stephen said, you can't keep going with this indefinitely. Everybody has a season. You do what you do, and then some people can continue going on, and I just marvel at Doug, and actually you guys. But for me, I'm really definitely writing prose.
And Douglas, still the same question.
What was the question again? I hate to be on the fence about this, because if I had to make a choice, I don't know how I would choose, to be very honest. I love writing. I love getting immersed in a project that I care about. I've been very passionate about musical theater for the last 25 years. I don't regret it, but I do feel something's changed. I feel like it's harder, and I don't understand that because I feel like we all have a lot more credits now, right? So credits should come with credibility. And yet, the finances are so ridiculous now, that I like having a sense of control. And I think I have a really lovely sense of control again, and reclaiming what it is that I love to do when I'm writing a book. and it, if you don't get it published, then you don't get published. It wasn't 10, 12 years of your life. So you can move on to the next. And it doesn't have that residual feeling of the bittersweet feeling that we've all become very accustomed to. So I have to say that I'm working on a novel now, but I'm also working on a play because this is just a calling. It feels like something I need to do. And at the same time, I also produced an album this last year, The Big Time. Well, the big time is the album that was produced, that was released on Concord Records with Santina Fontana, Debbie Gravitt, Will Swenson, and Jackie Hoffman, among others. And Douglas Carter Bean is the book writer. And we had worked on this show, and there was the pandemic, and we had done an amazing concert at the McCarter Theater at the end of January 2020. And the soundboard engineer recorded it. And we were all set to play it during the pandemic. And then Playbill said, or Equity said, you can't do that even if the actors have signed off on it, because they didn't know beforehand they were being recorded. So again, we were thwarted. And I thought, wow, so this will just disappear, won't it? You know, we won't have any momentum building on that concert. So that's when I decided that I was going to, with August Eric Smoen, the great orchestrator, put together this album. And then Concord loved it and they released it. So let's hope somebody produces it. I don't want to say too much about the other two things that are in gestation, because I'm just kind of a little protective of that. You know, it's like if I commit to it out here, then it means that there's a certain expectation. But all I can say is I just hope to continue writing. My father wrote until he was 96 years old, and I understand now why that is our salvation, and why writers need to write.
Without great material, actors can't act. Without great songs, singers cannot sing. And now you've met the people that write the material that allows people to do what they do. It takes a village to create something, and we forget about those small parts. I would like to thank my amazing videographer, it's also her birthday, Magda Katz. Happy birthday, Magda. I would like to thank Ramel Gopez and the Hotel Edison for hosting this. They are an amazing group of people. If you need a hotel, I recommend this highly. Also, Craig Horsley, who's one of the producers of The Wiz, and that's opening tonight. So he's in a tux with red, with clicking those heels. And I would like to thank all of the audience that came here today. This has been live from the Hotel Edison, Times Square Chronicles presents, and I'm Susanna Bowling. Thank you.